I said, what we'd like to do is if you've got a question, I'll take some pauses as we go through. But please drop a question in the chat and we'll be able to look at them, or you can, I think if you raise your hand in the chat and I can come to you and you can expand on it. Kind of to run through almost the kind of agenda, there's kind of 4 main points that I'd like to cover. First of all, which is an update on the work that's going on both kind of BC centrally and within the region for the planning of how we're going to reach the end of the shutdown and what the plans are to know when that's going to be. Secondly, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the various disciplines are kind of planning at the current state of play for the autumn, so we can get a picture of what, based on our best predictions, we can pull together and what you can expect is going to be happening in the autumn. Thirdly, I'd like to talk about some of the plans that myself and Rich Griffiths, who's the clubs and coaching officer, have pulled together for a kind of a contingency for a position in the late summer or autumn. And then finally, also, I think it'd be very valuable to take an opportunity to look a little bit further ahead towards 2021, both in the context of recovering from the shutdown, but also looking at some of the stuff that we might want to change anyway within the regional calendar, looking ahead further into the future from 2021 and beyond. So without any further ado, I will get cracking with the first of those points, which is, I guess, part of the main reason why a lot of you here is to find out what BC have been up to in this time. Ruth, did you want to give a very brief update just based on what you'd filled in around the furlough situation and so on?
Yeah, hi guys. You probably saw the original press release which Julie sent out, which noted our position for initially in response to the government's furlough scheme. As of Friday, so the 1st of May, we made an additional number of staff on furlough for the May and June period. So that was really, I guess, in response to 2 things. One is forecasting and reforecasting budgets, looking back, obviously the HSBC situation kicking in, and then the government scheme being extended to June. It's just an opportunity we felt to furlough people now on this side, I guess, to then have them available on the other side, so into June, depending on when restart might commence, be able to call them back. Really, so if there is that gap in workload and that space where we're not actually able to deliver, then having that ability to recall them after a minimum of 3 weeks put on furlough to then be able to ramp up again to come out the other side is what we've done. So what that's done in terms of the regional teams is reduce us to having a pattern of 1 club and coaching officer, 1 regional events officer, 1 cycling delivery manager, and in most regions a recreation officer and a number of coaches, to a skeleton of 3 cycling delivery managers, of which I am one. There's 1 in Central, Amy, who's West Midlands, and 1 in Yorkshire, Yorkshire and who's covering the North. Then 2 regional events officers, of which Felix is 1 and Mark Dole in Central is the other. 1 recreation officer covering some content across the country, supporting those programmes. And then in terms of club and coaching officer, we've got two positions left in that, which is Yulia, who's down in the southwest, and Jack, who's in the northeast. So that's, I guess, as a regional team to give you an idea of where we're stripped back to at the minute. But as I said, with the ability, depending on what the government guidance looks like and a myriad other factors, have that ability to call people back in to start ramping up out the other side. And just losing Rich, our club and coaching officer, in this period, we got through a phenomenal amount of work in the last couple of weeks. He put in to work with Felix and the team essentially to work out that different scenarios about how we could ramp back up again and feed into things like you'll have all had surveys about if you're involved with clubs, about clubs and groups maybe come to some of our focus groups. So there's a whole chunk of work going on in the background about how we can better serve clubs, how we can review our coaching offer. So that work has been fed into and is being worked on in this period. I guess where we are now is that as of tomorrow morning, we'll have an all-staff briefing with Danny, who's the head of cycling delivery, of which there are 23 of us left in the cycling delivery directorate. So that's including some HQ staff, including the cycle sport team some of you may deal with. So Rick Clarkson still being around, Mark still being around in that team, and Kath McClelland. So, and then we've got Joe in talent and Jason still with us as well, who some of you may liaise with. So as of that, we kind of hit reset as of tomorrow morning. There's a ELT, which is all the directors, meeting this afternoon, and then we'll reset tomorrow morning on an all staff and a management call to look at what work streams and priorities we are looking at in this period. And unsurprisingly, you'll know that events is front and centre of that, and both myself and Felix will be engaged in that. We'll also progress things like discipline plans that some of you may have been working on, and there's some other projects that can be almost accelerated in this period as well in the background, while we're not actually out delivering. So I guess if there's any more questions, just chuck them in the chat box and I can come back to them at the end. But I think, Felix, is that enough of what you were looking for at this period? Yeah.
Super. Thank you very much. Okay, so on to we had a Ruth and I were on a call this morning with Jonathan Day, who's I think the head of national delivery is his title. And he's sitting in the there's a working group effectively that are developing the decision-making process around which we're going to return to activity across events and coaching and all the other activities. And so to outline where they are, and this is all currently a work in progress at the moment, is that they have had a initial kind of group that have developed the concept around what the approach might be and what principles they're going to apply to making those decisions. There is a call tomorrow across every delivery department, so that will be the coaching department, the youth talent department, the events department, and across the disciplines, to look at that kind of above, very kind of top end piece of work in more detail. And then out of that call tomorrow, they will be forming working groups to look specifically at what the return to activity might look like. So, for example, what the club activity return to activity plan is, and what the events activity return to plan might be. So that's what's kind of going on right as we speak. What was relayed to us this morning was that effectively, even at the point of these groups making these discussions at the moment, they don't know any more than you guys would have picked up from the news, which I found quite a shock, to be totally honest. And I think it does illustrate why it's been quite hard to get the communications and the messaging out for us at your kind of at the coalface, so to speak, is because there is a long chain of command through the Department of Culture, Media, Sport, and because they're not in the Cobra meeting to be on, they aren't able to pass that information on down the chain effectively. So that's where we're kind of keep on stalling. All they said we can do effectively is look at the approach that other countries are taking that are further through this process and use that as a guide of what we might expect. Now, one thing that I think we were kind of keen to impress upon is that we wanted to start this communication pattern now, and one of the really important pieces that was triggered by the meeting this morning is a kind of a clear communication strategy that wants to come out of that work group, so that even if we can't tell you now or in this week what will happen, we can tell you when the information is going to be shared and give you a picture of when the decisions will be made and when the information will be shared, if that makes sense. So whereas we are currently dealing with a lack of information, we're aware that the government might be announcing kind of some more guidance on their plans over the weekend. What we are working on right now is at least giving you the indication of when that information is going to be shared. So the way I put it a week or so ago is we're going to announce the announcement effectively as soon as we can, if that makes sense. So yeah, I appreciate that. It's probably not as much detail as anyone would have hoped for, but that is kind of where we are at the moment, and hopefully that gives you a clue of kind of where we are in the scale of at least being able to give you information about, for example, the end of June. And I know that was picked up as something that has been relayed to the people looking at those decisions about a mid-May was given as kind of a window internally asked for by staff about an indication of when the extension would be announced, or an extension would be announced from the end of June. So that's where we are based on those meetings kind of with some of the guys in management in British Cycling. Ruth, is there anything you want to add from the call this morning? Or
no, I just think that was really clear that you're pushing that sort of six to eight week window to have that sort of preparation time to be able to offer something at the end of it, was what you're really sort of driving at. And I think that's the feedback across the board you'd had from those who organise events, really to be able to, to make them work, I guess, to get everything, all the boxes ticked off and get them up and running. I mean, different levels of event will be different. But that was pretty clear that message got home, I think, this morning.
And so with that, said, does anybody have any questions about that? And I appreciate it's more about the process of how the decisions we made rather than the decisions themselves. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Maybe just drop a note in the chat and we can come around the group if anyone has anything they are wondering. Or did I explain it so well that everyone now knows exactly what they need to know? Awesome. Or was it just so unclear that no one knows what's going on? Okay, so like I said, if anything comes up, please just drop a note in there and we can come back and pick it up again. What I'd like to cover as well is, like I said, about a month or so ago, we had a meeting which included Andy Cook as the regional chair, Pete Deemer, who's on this call now. Andy unfortunately can't join us. It was Adam Buckland, who again unfortunately can't join us. John Twitchen from BMX, who's on this call, and I think was that everyone? Did I miss anyone? Cyclocross, and Mark Adams was there as well. And what we were discussing at that call is that we were looking at it, and one of the things that happened when the shutdown started, and it was around the cancellation of the events like Cheltenham and the Bath Half was embroiled in there, is because everyone was waiting for the official confirmation, it ended up being put upon individual event organisers to make the decisions about what they were going to do. And so now we're flipping that on its head, where we've got event organisers having to make decisions in the future that they might not have full information. So whilst we don't know exactly what is going to happen, we can plan for kind of potential hypothetical situations almost. And so when posed with the question, say, hypothetically, we are back racing again in the autumn, which is where we think is a potentially a likely outcome. What is each discipline looking like? What are we going to look like for our competition in the autumn? So that right, we can start to pass that information out and riders can start to know what they're preparing for, but also crucially we don't end up with a complete mess of all the disciplines doing their own different thing and different event organisers all piling in and trying to coordinate a little bit, which is my job after all. So so if I could do a bit of it, we've got most of a few people from a lot of the disciplines here, and I've spoken to a few of you individually as well recently. So John, do you want to kick us off from BMX? So just give us a kind of an overview of what BMX are thinking in terms of your current planning for events this year.
Obviously, proviso is it depends, doesn't it? But assuming something could happen in September, we've got a functional date already in the calendar in the South region, at least anyway, for the South Champs, which is the 13th of September. Is that right? I think that was the right one. And obviously that could get bumped if there was a like Formula One style mad panic to get a national series completed over 4 weekends or something, then any other regional stuff would probably get bumped. I think, however, it's more likely to be the other way around, where club or regional or even sub-regional stuff, can happen. So I don't want to speculate about all that. We've had that conversation, Felix, but our existing date for the South Champs, which would normally be at the end of a 9-race regional summer series that obviously we had round one and that was it. It would normally be after the British Championships, which looks like it won't happen, certainly when it normally does, end of August. So it would end up becoming a standalone event. So our thoughts then are, if it's the one and only or the next race either way, it would probably be bloody huge. So we'd have to prepare accordingly. And obviously September is just as useful when it comes to daylight as March is. So the day isn't the longest. In fact, it's one of the shorter ones before clocks readjust. So, we're thinking about all those things. So it wouldn't be a normal race day either. And then subsequent to that, we normally run a winter series, which is sort of a bit of the BMX South region. Again, won't go into it now. It's a bit bigger than South BC region. But our normal approach in winter is obviously they're smaller events. If that's the only racing that people are going to are looking at, decent series this year, we might have to make that into a more substantial series and again change the race day around. So it's a full regional team rather than a sort of Heath Robinson effort that you normally get in the winter with smaller numbers and shorter days. So we would juggle things around and it might become, a fairly decent series. That's normally 6 events over 4-ish months, so one every 3 weeks. I just must say as well that we're relatively self-sufficient, I suppose, in terms of commissaires and marshals, and we don't need roads to be shut and all that kind of stuff. So, we can run alongside other events. We aren't going to draw on resources, even banners and fences and stuff. We're kind of, self-reliant in that respect. So we'll happily get on and do our thing alongside others which might take more of a resource draw, you know, cyclocross and road, I imagine, use some of the same resources in winter, for example. So, you know, if it's cold, it's fine. If it's icy, clearly roadies have a problem. We might have an issue, but we'll normally wait till 10 or 11 o'clock and crack on with it. Over to you.
Super, thanks, John. So yeah, and I think that kind of covered a couple of points that will be common across other disciplines, is that we have a catch-22 where we're going to probably be trying to scale down public participation events whilst at the same time having one event that everyone in the country is going to be trying to get to. So yeah, a bit of a catch-22. Kerry from the Wessex Cyclocross League, would you mind filling us a little bit on the situation for Crossriders?
Yep, okay. First thing, we've gone by our AGM date, so we have officially postponed that, and we're trying to arrange that before the league, or we will arrange it before the league season starts, whenever that might be. Whether we do it face to face or whether we do an online version, then that's what we're going to do. Currently, we're planning to start our season as normal in September and run on through. Really, we're planning that way because we have no other plans to go by in terms of official ideas or directions of what we're doing. In the background, yes, we've got lots of different ideas which may or may not work depending on what we're told we can do. The event organisers are being liaised with at the moment because obviously they use venues which are sometimes private, sometimes publicly owned, and they themselves have got different rules as to whether they are prepared to actually book the venues at the moment. But we are liaised with the organisers with that at the moment. A few ifs and buts there, but as we see it, all the events that we've currently planned are able to at least book the venues and facilities and stuff like. Obviously, we got plans that if the league season can't start in September, it could start in October, could even start in January with a different bunch of organisers, different events, different venues. Might just be a mini league. Obviously, our next closest league, shall we say, going north, has decided to cancel their league already. That may in turn give us a problem in terms of numbers. So we will have to look to see how we're going to manage that, because it might be that we only operate with reduced fields. So we'll have to manage that. I think we like BMX. We are pretty self-sufficient, certainly in terms of gear and whatnot. A lot of clubs have got their gear. Wessex has got his own gear. Adam Buckland supplies gear. Appreciate that Adam himself may have a problem in terms of Wessex and mountain biking, depending on how the seasons overlap, but I'm sure we'll overcome that. But really, everything, we're planning for the to happen as normal, but we've got thoughts in the background as to what we could do. But it's just a question of, if we put 10 items on the paper and say this is 10 different ways we do it, I feel certain that the government will come up with a different way. So we're not really committing anything to anybody until we actually know what we can do.
Indeed, there's a never-ending list of potential situations, isn't there? So yeah. So, thanks, Kerry. So I think that's again another good indication of where the lay of the land is, so to speak. And like I say, I've spoken to Adam, who's runs the Southern XC mountain bike series, and also obviously contributes with the cross as well. And his intention effectively mirrors what we've described there. Is that he's looking to run events to the greatest extent that is possible and allowed, meaning that he might need to get creative in terms of field sizes and event management, but also he's looking to make the most of what is possible. On a similar note, speaking of mountain biking, Len, hey, do you mind giving us a brief kind of note on where we are with downhill and up your end of the region, please?
Yeah, no problem. So like Felix says, the downhill. So we've had discussions with Felix before about dates. So we're looking, obviously, running again either in July, if that's possible. If not, we'll move that back and possibly running then September, October, November, December. Because we hold our events at 417 Bike Park, we're self-sufficient. We don't need any equipment. We've got all that sorted out. And then similar, if we start in September, we'll hopefully put back on the development days, which will run on the Saturday, and then the downhill days will be on the Sunday. And then we'll just reset again in January and just run the series again next year from there. That's our intentions. And obviously we were looking at the downhill development centres as a pilot, so we're just going to put that on hold and hopefully start those in 2021.
Super. Thank you, Len. So, and again, I think we'll and to cover circuit and road, I think we're waiting in to see for road racing. I think there's a feeling. Can we just make sure we've muted mics? Just I'm hearing myself. I think there's a feeling that road is possibly the most vulnerable discipline because of the policing permissions required and the medical resourcing that's required and so on. So that's probably the discipline that's in the most jeopardy or might take the longest to come back online. However, obviously looking at those requirements and the possibility that circuit racing opens, presuming that we get to the point where we're running cyclocross races and so on under the government guidelines, we would expect hopefully to be able to run circuit races on a similar basis. And so I know that having spoken to a lot of organisers, there is a real vary. Some have said we're coming back next year. Others have said we're going to backload this as long as we can, and the day that we're allowed to run, we're getting things going, and we're going to go till the light ends us. So kind of like John mentioned, that people will get creative with the way they deliver their schedule to try and get as much racing done as possible. So I think the general, if I was going to say for one attitude across the whole region, is that I think we're very fortunate that a lot of our organisers are talking with the mindset of we're going to put as much on as we can, rather than, like we've mentioned about the Central Cyclocross League, kind of just upping sticks and waiting until it's all completely blown over. So I think what's really positive is there is an attitude amongst the regional event organisers that we want to do what we can as soon as we can, obviously whilst making sure it's safe. And we're going to think creatively to do that and think about how we deliver these events to try and make sure everyone get the most out of them. So that's kind of a cover of all the disciplines and what we've been talking about amongst kind of working groups and event organisers looking towards the autumn. Does any of the anyone that's an organiser that's not been in these conversations or a rider have any questions for myself or any of the other kind of representatives for different disciplines?
No, I don't think the only thing I would say would be how it's based on the management of social distancing at any events we run.
Yeah, and this is exactly the kind of conversations we've been having, is looking at an event and going, where are the danger points, where are the flash points, for example, registration or the mountain bike race, for example, to start, and thinking about how you change the delivery of those events to minimise that. And for example, mountain bike time trials have been discussed to avoid the kind of mass start and so on. So yeah, exactly. It's trying to look at when we get the guidelines and we get an indication of what we'll be allowed to do. It's looking at those and then thinking with common sense about where we can operate to try and to minimise the risk, whilst also ensuring you get as many people involved as possible. Because other things we've discussed, like John alluded to about having one big event, and Kerry mentioned about having the Central Cyclocross League off, is that suddenly you've got people travelling, potentially longer distances than normal. And so actually, can we think about how we open up the entries and or how we schedule the events to make sure we've got reduce the need for people to travel across the region and beyond and so on. So yeah, those are all very important considerations.
Sure, thanks.
Super. Okay, and so the next thing I wanted to kind of to talk about a bit was something that, as Ruth mentioned, Rich Griffiths, who's the clubs and coaching officer, has been is on furlough as of Thursday. But before he went on furlough, he and I worked on pulling together a little piece of work that I think a few of the people will have heard about already and been involved in the discussion slightly on, which was around what the coaching and clubs offer is in the run up to competition. And that's kind of on the assumption almost, or the presumption that we expect that some form of club activity or coaching activity will happen or be possible before full-flung regional ranking events. And that's for the reasons you kind of alluded to there. For example, Bob, that we've got events have flashpoints that coaching sessions or club sessions won't necessarily have with such large numbers. And so what Rich and I have been putting together, which is to come off the back of some of the work that I've been doing with the Zwift racing, which some of you have been part of, so thank you, is that we've actually been using the Zwift, the online racing platform, to try and keep people engaged at the moment in a way that would have been difficult without online events. And whilst we appreciate that Zwift racing is not the be-all and the end-all, what we have noticed is there's quite a lot of people getting involved with that aren't actually normally or historically participating in competitive cycle sport. And so what we're trying to use the online racing for, plus a coaching and club offer, is to try and capture some of those people that haven't raced before or don't race regularly, whilst also trying to make the most of the people we've managed to retain, but also in a potential window where events aren't happening, but we are back to club and coaching activity, is to come up with an offer that will engage people and give them that little bit of competition that they want in a controlled way, rather than leaving it as a free-for-all and just waiting and seeing what happens. So what we've pulled together is for as a coaching offer for those that might have been on Zwift and not raced before, or new to racing and want a little bit more of a skill set, is a coaching to racing offer that would be effectively a 4-week syllabus where we would cover the basics for each discipline, so that someone would be in a position that after some weeks coaching, they'd be in a position where they could enter a regional event. We're also looking at non-ranking events. So again, people have mentioned about thinking about sub-regional events, but can we run local level non-ranking events where you might get a group of, depending on the numbers, 10, 15, 20 riders together to run a bit of race practice in a kind of controlled environment with coaching supervision that isn't an event. It might be a non-ranking event, or it might just be coach-led racing, but something along those formats to try and start to allow people to kind of itch that scratch and get back to not competition, but being competitive and race practice in a format that will not only hopefully upskill them and get them ready to race when the events return, but also help to avoid that kind of chaotic people just going and inventing their own races. And we've spoken quite a bit with quite a few people about how the clubs know best and don't try and reinvent the wheel, but it's looking at things like chain gangs and going to how can we facilitate that using the facilities we've got for the roadies, and then equivalents in cyclocross or the other disciplines to come up with a structured way of allowing people to have a bit of kind of local friendly competition without it being a competitive event. So that's what we're putting together, and we feel we've got to a position using local coaches where we'd be in a position to roll out quite quickly once Rich returns from furlough and once the opening from the government, once the regulations start to allow that, and hopefully that's something that both riders and organisers could look at as an opportunity to start to build the momentum for when events are allowed to return in their full form. Does anybody have any questions about that component of what we're talking about?
No. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Hi,
And thank you for the good work, Alice.
It's Neil Dunnage here.
Neil.
Sounds like a great idea. I think there's another aspect to this, which is just seeing that we're seeing hordes of new cyclists back out on the roads, is embracing them somehow. Mm-hmm. And not just racing, but maybe here's some really nice routes. If you live in, I don't know, Cirencester, or if you live in Keynsham, here's a nice route to take your family out on that's nice and safe, and there's a pit stop or a mechanic on the way. Simple things like that, and then sort of embrace all of these new riders, because we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity at the moment.
Oh no, I couldn't agree more, and I think that's true, like you said, from the competitive side, which is kind of where my realm is to some extent with events, but also looking at broader events. So one of the pieces of work that we'd started moving on kind of just before the furlough came in was to look at a women's sportive to be a kind of for the Breeze champions and all the Breeze rides to try and pull together as a kind of celebration of what they've achieved over the last few years. And so I 100% agree that formats around standard leisure riding effectively is another really important opportunity that actually that we've kind of stumbled upon in some ways. And so yeah, I think it's certainly in one of the major work streams. Ruth, have you got anything to add on the rec side?
I was just thinking maybe something like the family time trial, or the village family time trial, or something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah.
So do it when you like.
Yeah, there's
a nice route.
There's two aspects of that. One, our recreation programs team are looking at that. You know, if the first stage is to restart in groups of say up to 8 or 10 or something like that, so that brings in some coach-led activity and some of our Breeze and guided ride programs, our ride leadership programs for that. So it's just molding it and timing it around that, and the launch of Let's Ride local.co.uk, I think that's right, I'll put it in the group chat in a minute. That was launched last week, very much aimed at families. So that's a campaign really, just pulling together. It's a front page that signposts a lot of kind of what is there at the minute. And in terms of routes, the bank of routes that are there are historic, that were created under the Skyride programme. So they're very much around our big towns and cities. So certainly, yeah, we're aware of that, and that's why it was a little bit hard to promote the routes aspect, because we know that they're there for a large number of people in big urban conurbations, but not the masses. So I think we've made a start on that, and I think then it will overlap into clubs and how we can support clubs to do exactly what you're saying as well for clubs and groups that know their own local area, to be able to treat them and our training riders in the recreation programs, how we can be pooling that and just growing that resource really. So yeah, spot on.
Yeah, it'd be nice to upload our own routes.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've certainly found really valuable is that there's a huge amount of experience in event organisers, but actually the same goes for all the elements that we're talking about at the regional level, and the clubs have a vast amount of experience about good club level delivery, and we've leaned on the kind of some of the experienced club members to help guide us with the way we're constructing things like this coaching to racing kind of idea, and how we make the most of, as Andy Cook likes to put it, the old and bold approach to make it as good as possible. And so, for example, there's really great examples of good practice in the moment in the current shutdown, such as VC Walcott have been running a virtual club ride, but instead of doing it on Zwift, they're putting a route up on Strava that they recommend, and then the club riders are going out in their club kit and taking a photo as they do it, and things like that, to try and think about how we engage as many people that have opened their eyes to cycling is exactly a really important thing, and fundamentally that lays the foundations for everything we're talking about at a competitive level. That's where our competitive riders come from.
I'll just put a little link. I'll find the link to the club resources, the toolkits that might be useful from an events perspective, and share that on the chat in a sec when I find it. The guides that Rich and team put together.
Chris Crowther, what's that note? Note this is in this week's BC Bulletin. BC Bulletin is introducing HSBC UK. That's why local. Yes, that's the
that's on the details on the Let's Toy It Local for people if they want to check it out.
Great. So any questions around the kind of integrate, and I think it's one of the things that I'm only recently in this post, but it's one of the things that I was quite keen to emphasise when I was interviewing with Ruth et al. Was that it's looking to integrate the coaching and the entry level events into the broader regional calendar, because I think it's one of the things that can quite often happen for competitive cycle sport, is that whereas we might look at it and go, oh, fourth cat's entry level, or we offer a novice race at whatever event, it can actually still be quite a large hurdle for these people that have just dug a bike out the shed at the moment to reach that point where they're engaging with it. And so integrating the clubs, the coaching offer with the competitive offer is a really valuable and important thing, and hopefully that will come across in what we can do late in this year and into the future. Okay, so onto the final topic, which is something that, again, I was working on having just started, and it was one of the things I was really keen to get my teeth into, and then this has all put a stop to it in some ways, but actually I think there's a real opportunity to expedite some of the work I was looking at, which is the regional calendar of events, and this goes across all disciplines, and road is what I know best, so that's where I started, has some fantastic historical reasons for why events sit in certain places. But as we've seen discussions, I think Dan Lloyd did an episode for GCN about the UCI calendar, about do we need to look at this and go, well, we've got a rejig, and events that we're never going to move for love nor money are suddenly looking at September and October dates quite happily. And so one of the things that I would like to kind of address, and I'd like some thoughts and feedback on from everyone here almost, is how we look to start to rebuild looking ahead to 2021 based on the fact that we've had no events for this year. Now that is to account for the unique situation we're in now, where we might have lots of new riders, as Neil's mentioned. We might have lots of riders that haven't raced for a while, and I know there's lots of people worrying about the BC points thing, but I'm pretty certain it's not being confirmed, but there's going to be a freeze, I'm almost certain. And looking ahead towards 2021, how we can readdress the balance of events. And certainly I know from my experience in road and circuit that what I felt was the missing piece, if you're looking at it from a new rider's point of view, or particularly a young new rider, youth rider's point of view, is that entry level offer. And actually, can we use this kind of reset and the fact that we're going to get a bit of a rejig in the calendar and the people who are organising events to try and one of my objectives is to expand that entry level offer. Now that goes for really kind of grassroots level go race kind of things for kids or for adults, but all the way through to up to the point where I think we have a lack of regional B road races, where we have lots of 2, 3, 4 road races, but not many 3, 4 road races, and we lose a lot of the circuit races that do Castle Combe and Odd Down and Thruxton and so on to road racing, because the leap is so large. And so basically my question to you is, if you had a blank canvas, which we almost have, what would you want to see built into the way we construct our regional calendar of events, and that goes for non-competitive events as well, of course, because we could neglect sportives and go race level events across all the disciplines. What's missing? What needs to be changed, and what could be done differently, almost?
I think with road racing, I think that gap, handicap racing, kind of fills some of that gap. So we kind of, as the rules became more constrained around the road racing, it became too hard to run handicap races with three or four groups on the road at any one time. I think handicap racing fills that gap nicely because you get a nice blend of experience and newbies that can benefit, but it became too hard. So I don't know, some circuit handicap racing maybe.
Yeah, I ran women's handicap races at Odd Down for a few years, and apart from annoying the second cats, it was quite a good experience for the fourth and third cats. So yeah, it's getting the second cat lobby on board is the tricky thing with that. But yeah, no, I agree. I think handicaps are, and again, that's a new approach at looking at, well, an old approach, but a new approach at filling a gap that might not be currently catered for.
Hi, Felix.
Hello.
Just a couple of thoughts on that. I think like entry level events are really great and really useful. I think we've got a few good ones already for women in our region, but it would be really good to see a couple more like go race type events towards the start of the season. And then also as a secondary thing, I think actually the Zwift races should maybe stay. I would love to see like a few over the winter. I think the British Cycling Women's Series ones have been really good for like kind of pulling together a competitive cohort from across the country. Because I think we suffered a sort of lack at the Bristol South Women's Road Race this year of the kind of normal club Cat 3-4 races that we get, because it had been such a horrendous winter that no one really felt fit enough to tackle a road race at that stage of the season.
Yeah, and without wanting to tread into the dangerous world of calendar fixing, one of the things that I would look at is, first of all, I'm having thoughts about whether Odd Down is worth my cold Saturday afternoons in the winter, and whether we need to have a think about how things like that are scheduled, but therefore the knock-on effects about how the rest of the year fits around as well. And then one of the things that I was looking at already, and this autumn might present an opportunity, is running autumn races at Odd Down when the weather's nicer into the winter, and then maybe ending up with a slight rebalancing where we delay the start of the road season because of the flooding and getting cancelled all the time, but also, like you said, that problem of people not feeling ready to go. And so again, it's thinking about the calendar strategically to go, what do people need at what point in the year, rather than we just put it here because it's always there. And again, exactly that kind of thing, is that what kind of races need to build up to the Bristol South Women's Road Race to get people ready to do it. And I think women's racing is a very good example because everything is very similar to the men's races, but it's a much more extreme situation because the pool is smaller. And that's what I found, is that a lot of the things that I tried to implement to fix women's races suddenly also help support the men's races at Odd Down, for example. And so I think that's probably where the lessons can often be learned, is from where the fields are under most pressure is kind of where we can see how we can improve and change things. And on the Zwift races, that is part of the piece of work that I'm obviously spending a lot of time on at the moment, is how can we learn from what we're delivering at the moment to try and build something that could fold into that e-racing national championships that they televised last year, and what the winter offer is through a parallel with cyclocross that Zwift might be able to implement. So yeah, that is 100% on the cards.
Nice, that sounds great.
So Felix, just one thing. So obviously we discussed earlier in the year, haven't we, about the dirt crits, come and try it events. Is maybe at the beginning of the season is trying to put them on for each discipline specific. So you're building the riders up or doing some coach-led racing. I know it's a bit different, obviously, for us at downhilling, but obviously in some of the other disciplines, it may be something to think about, that you put one or two of these on, and then it leads into the racing. So you're going to get more people coming up, hopefully through the ranks and wanting to try it across all the disciplines.
Yeah, 100%. So to fill in those that haven't been in these conversations, so one of my schemes that I came up with back before everything stopped was to run what was termed by the mountain bike guys dirt crits, effectively. So something that an organizer could pop up in a park in an hour and a half or so, and then you'd do a local level races where you might do 2 or 3 races in seeded viability groups, and it was non-ranking local level racing for new races, but also people that just wanted to have a bit of fun. Now we kind of rebranded it because no one knows what a dirt crit was. It got lots of confused looks. It's basically just a bike race using what you've got available, and that's kind of, again, what you mentioned about getting people involved in the village fair TT. Effectively, Neil, is kind of that idea, is to go, well, we've got a bit of space. It might be a BMX track, a pump track, it might be a bit of park, and we'll do some cyclocross, or you might have a circuit like Odddown. We're going to hold a bike race, and you bring a bike and you race it, and if you're fast, you go in Group A, and if you're slow, you go in Group D. So again, it's learning some of the lessons of Zwift, and using that to model what we want to do. And I would agree, Len, is that is exactly the kind of thing that you might be talking about to get people to bridge from coaching or maybe riding chain gangs, do a little bit of kind of small focused competition to get you into racing. The only caveat with starting the season with it is that if it's miserable weather, you might be putting people off rather than getting people started. But the sentiment I completely agree with.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can adapt it. I mean, because of the weather, it's just obviously that idea, you know what I mean, to build them up and then hopefully get them through for the rest of the season and get more people in. Yeah, that's
precisely the concept. And you want to design the season so that you've got those jumping on points for people that and we see all the time, we lose the number of fourth cats dwindles as the year goes on because there isn't ways of people accessing road circuit racing later in the year. And so maybe there needs to be something to help to drive that as well. So yeah, exactly. Anything else on looking ahead and kind of what we want the 2021 calendar to start to look like?
Felix, something I'd like to say from NEG point of view. We're ready to go whenever, you know, the races start, but we're also prepared to, if the racing went into late October and even into November, then that wouldn't be a problem for us.
Good to hear.
But also, what Alice was saying about the women's Bristol South Road race, that was really disappointing. That was, you know, that. But I'd like to see more women's road race in the region.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've got a piece of work that I will share once it's more finished, and at the moment it's only got road on it, which is partly why I'm keeping it under wraps so I can be fair. But when you put the women's road races on a schematic, it's quite a shocking picture in a lot of ways, and I think it does illustrate quite clearly where work needs to be done. And again, even the men's road calendar shows similar kind of gaps, and so, but I think looking at it strategically, hopefully we'll start to build a picture. And again, looking across the different disciplines, I've spoken with a few cyclocross organisers around how we learn some of the lessons that things have gone well, but still look to build. Obviously, we know the Wessex League have had some fantastic numbers over the last few years, and how do we build on that success to support the Western League, or use some cross-league support to try and build some kind of really high-profile events in the region and so on. So yeah, across all the different disciplines, there's certainly gaps and lessons, and that's kind of what I think. If you take this kind of message back to your clubs and the people you know in your network almost, and go, look, we want to try and improve things. Can we use the chance that we've got for this reset? Because we can start planning for the cyclocross season and for 2021 now, obviously with hopefully a bit of an autumn, late summer season. And actually, normally we're constantly chasing our tail. We'd be right in the midst of the racing season now. So if we can start thinking about next year now, it gives us more of an opportunity to get some of the things right that we might not have considered till it was too late in a normal year. So that's kind of why I think it's valuable to try to start to have this conversation.
How long are you looking to, if once we start races again, well, all races, not just road, but how long are you looking to run them up until? I know, like, so cyclocross is winter anyway. But like road, are you looking to run probably into November? So
it will depend on, first of all, the organisers. Kind of, I think is a real kind of crucial point, because we need organisers to organise the bike races, and then it will be a question of, like you said, about NEG being available, but also commissaires being available, and so on and so on. So we'll have to be careful, because there will be an appetite from the riders to I'm almost certain to get stuck in and get involved as much as possible. Yeah. And what we wouldn't want to do is end up in a position where we overstretch ourselves being very enthusiastic about it. And like I said, we're very fortunate in this region. We seem to have quite an enthusiasm behind making stuff happen this autumn. But what we don't want to end up doing is, for example, running events that aren't safe, and therefore we get in a position where the police are unhappy with holding road races, or we end up having an impact on local residents. And one of the things we do have to think about is that if we're going to be bringing 100 people in for a mountain bike race or a cyclocross race or a road race into a village or a rural part of the country, in these times, that is potentially going to be a really bad thing to do. no simple terms. So there's quite a lot of factors that will feed into it. But like I said, as a region, I think we're basically looking at it. So what can we do? What is going to be sensible? Is going to be allowed? Let's do that, rather than just doing the minimum.
I think
there'll be the other thing. Sorry.
I think there's another additional pressure, which is that as the lockdown ends and sports start up again, they're going to start up from the bottom, not from the top. And the emphasis from the government is going to be start from the bottom, not from the top. So if anything, the pressure, there's going to be more pressure on us to put on quality racing.
That was my point entirely. I agree with that. I think more likely at club and small level. So in some ways, the more the merrier. I'm still quite concerned about the number that we might get at events. You just look at a queue outside B&Q or Tesco on day one after they're allowed to open. Everyone goes a bit crazy for a week or so. So I think the idea of coaching and structured sessions into races hopefully will manage to funnel that slightly and take some of that initial heat out of it as well. So I think it's worth clubs and the region as well, but clubs really thinking about how they can do that. I've got a wasp in here. How they can help with that sort of funneling, or the opposite, the release kind of process, so that we don't have everyone turn up at the first event, because everyone's really keen to put something on the first day they're allowed to.
And as Len mentioned, this let's race idea that we were kind of conceiving, the idea was that was something that people would ride to, and actually we wouldn't be planning for big car parking availability. It was the catchment area was people that can ride there in 20 minutes or so, and then it might be something where each little town and village has their own little version of this locally run bike race, which is nothing more than the local kids and the local families getting together and razzing it around a park or a pump track or a circuit, whatever it might be.
And hence, sorry, my comment there, the more the merrier in that regard. So, if there was a first event or a first weekend that, every club, every village almost, has a pop-up event like that, which, would be relatively low key and low cost and wouldn't need lots of resource, but could equally be sanctioned on some level and supported and therefore insured on some level, by BC without too many, strings attached to it, that we can just get on and run stuff. So, so that we don't end up with people traveling an hour or 3 to some event somewhere, and overwhelming it.
I think totally agree. And I think it's that point of just prioritising the local. I think the other bit is not being overly restrictive for the sake of it at our level on calendar discipline periods of seasons. Is that the right word? So just being relaxed about that, especially at the lower level, that as long as the resources aren't conflicting, that there's nothing actually wrong with running a road race and a cyclocross race on the same day in a region, because we should be challenging ourselves to get different riders to be riding them, not just looking at the 3 or 4 who might want to ride both at the top end. I think our focus needs to be that, getting people riding bikes and having fun and having that competitive, as many people as possible, as you say, in as managed way as we can, without adversely impacting each other or the locals, the wider locals. But yeah, all good.
That's I think my village, they'd love it if there's a 6-mile loop. If we could have a family ride and have some NEG as they race around, that'd be awesome. They'd love it.
You're hired, Debs.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've only got to say how many do you need? We're all itching to get going.
Okay, so any thoughts on any of the more of that, or I've got one more thing I'd like to cover before we wrap up as well. And so what that is, and like I said, if there's any questions, drop it in the chat, and I'll hand back over. So what we're trying to do at the moment, both at the regional level and, like I said, at the national level, kind of the same thing in some ways because of the reduced number of staff, is to work on a bit of, I mean, CPD is not quite the word, but kind of forums and discussions around event organising. So we had a meeting kind of a couple of weeks ago, which again a few of you guys were on, around adding value to an event and learning some of the lessons of how you can kind of jazz up an event and make it more exciting. So having photographers there and all that kind of thing. And I recorded that meeting and I've got a audio link that I can share around. I'm also in the process at the moment of running a few more sessions on a range of topics around event organising. And the way I'm formatting these is I'm actually just interviewing people one-on-one, and I'm going to edit these clips together into effectively a podcast and so on. So if anybody that they know that organises a fantastic event and they think that it would be worth having a conversation on, we've got topics coming up on organising youth events, on women's races, on entry-level events, on the kind of administration process. So if you've got someone you know is very good at getting their paperwork all sorted in time and so on, please get those kind of people to get in touch, and I can spend 10 minutes or so worth of kind of their thoughts on things, because what that's really important is that we can then take this and take this out, so that if there's a new event organizer going, oh, I'm not sure what to do, they've got all the knowledge of the region, hopefully in like a really good resource library effectively to draw upon. Because trust me, there's an event organizer manual coming through that I've been involved and Ruth's been involved in vetting, and it's quite the Bible. And so actually having something digestible that is useful for people is really important. And being realistic, we might be in a position where we lose because of the sustained time it might take before we return to normal. And actually we might need to be looking at new event organisers, new event officials and so on to support what we want to try and achieve in the region. If we do want to be ambitious later in this year and put as many events on as possible, we might have a real willingness in some departments, but need support across the rest of our volunteer base. So for example, this is an attempt to build a resource so that other event organisers have got the benefit of the knowledge of the other organisers in the region. And so if there's someone that's new to event organising that you think would be useful for them to hear these things, please send them that information or ask for it from me. And if there's someone you know that's got a real experience or a real flair for event organising, please send them my way so we can have a conversation and we can share their knowledge and their experience with others in the region. So thank you very much for your time this evening. I am happy to spend a bit of time answering some questions if anybody has anything else they want to ask Ruth or I around British cycling and the region in a more broad sense. But yeah, thank you for your time, and hopefully that, like I said, whilst we can't provide any concrete information about what's going to happen next, but hopefully we can give you an idea of what work has been done at the moment by British Cycling, so that, and the next step is that we're going to give you a schedule about when you should be able to find out about things, and hopefully that means that you will start to know what's coming rather than being left in that kind of indefinite limbo, which I think we're all feeling a bit.
I think that's right, Pete. I think when we're just initially brainstorming this, it's that webinar, those whatever it turns out to be, is I think it's probably two things. One is the updates about the updates, and the second one is that general, whatever the topics are, how do you create a great event, shared learning and good practice, attracting new organisers, that kind of thing. So there's probably two strands of content. One's the sort of regular updates channel, and then dropping into that, then how can we organise a local event, or what does it look like, and teasing that out might be something. Or and
so, for example, even the discussion we've had around running a local event is something that actually is something that an organiser might be willing to do it, but just not have any understanding of what that requires and so on. And so actually being able to share that idea even is something that hopefully will have a real impact across the region over the next few months. So yes, thank you very much. If you want to ask a question, please feel free. I can answer away. Or if you.
So, Felix, are you going to send out notes about this meeting, or?
So I've recorded it. Like I said, I'm going to pass this on to the BC staff, and we'll like I said, any questions that they feel that they can answer more thoroughly or in a different way to Ruth and I, then they can do that. Yeah. I'm happy to listen back and spend an hour tomorrow listening back again and take some notes so that we can pass it out if you want.
Yeah, because the surge on breakdown of stopping of lockdown is I think something that all clubs need to think about, especially at Bath. We organise our chain gang, which is a bit spicy at times. We can get 25, 30 people. We stress it's not a race, it's a group ride, etc., etc. But I can imagine the first Saturday of the easing of group riding restrictions, if it's a nice sunny day, is going to be quite challenging to keep people under control. So some guidance from British Cycling across all clubs on that. That's one thing I picked up from this meeting, which I hadn't thought about, hadn't dreamed of riding with somebody else. So it's not your forefront at the moment, but that could change very quickly.
And that's kind of what Rich and I have been trying to work on, is so that we don't suddenly have the restrictions drop and we weren't ready for it, and we spend 2 weeks trying to come up with a plan of how to help support you. And we're saying, well, what if we get a day when we have 300 people trying to show up to do a chain gang, and can we build something now that, as John put it, that spreads that load around a bit, so that there's an offer at odd down on a Saturday morning, so that people want to do a chain gang around the circuit can do that, and then you're running a chain gang, and we can spread that knowledge with the other clubs and so on, so that there's enough of an offer that people are ready to cater for it, rather than, oh, it's Saturday morning, ready to go, and suddenly you're getting dumped with all the riders in the region driving into Bath to do the chain gang, for example.
But I think there's an aspect of that everyone to think about as a continuation of the ride responsibly message, almost, that, abuse it and we'll lose it again. So, if we are let out, as it were, on a chain gang or whatever it might be, that small group, and it is abused, then we will lose it again, and we'll be back in Spain or something. So I think it's just being mindful of that now. And we've done pretty well to keep in this country, and we've worked really, really hard at it to get those messages out and to lobby the right people in government to keep us riding. So I think the next phase then is thinking about that now, and in those conversations, you guys have got influence with the people that you talk to starting to instill that. And certainly we will do more on it. But if you can help start those conversations now, that would be really, really good to start those thinking.
Might have to embrace 4-man team time trials or something at 2-minute intervals.
For women.
Yeah. Well, that might be the answer anyway. For all the race cats.
As I say, it might be the only form of racing we get this year.
Hill climbs was on the list as well, wasn't it, Felix?
Yeah. Hill climbs, that's a dirty word.
Yeah, I mean, it's none of my business, but I was thinking team time trials would be a really good thing to do. And in fact, BMX, time trialing used to be a weird Olympic or world champion sport. So around BMX tracks. So we can at least do that, maybe coaching into then time trials. Ditto with mountain bikes, I'm sure, anything where there's a fixed length. So, that's a great way probably to get people back into the skills of riding a bike in a small group as well. So, I'm all for that. I think it'd be good fun.
It's certainly been a common refrain across almost every forum I've seen about how the amount of fantastic engagement that's happened on Zwift, but people are going to forget to brake and turn around corners, and the first fence is going to be busy. And so having a way of channeling that and coming up with a way of doing some time trials and building some coach-led racing in, hopefully we'll get to the point where we can manage that rather than putting more load on the NHS than is required. So yeah. Super. So yeah, thank you very much for your input. Thank you for your time, and please, if there's someone that you think can contribute, and I'm looking at a lot of you already, to some of the kind of conversations about what delivers a good event, please give us a shout.
Nice one, Felix. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Have a good evening. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Felix.
Thank you.
Thanks.